Web phishing is a game. It's also a chat room. It's also a window into the past, to a simpler time, the age of the internet. Or rather, when the internet wasn't dominated by cryptographic Web3 infrastructures, generative AI content pipelines, hyper-targeted influencer monetization strategies, predictive analytics, engagement-optimized algorithms, and you get the gist. Web phishing captures the spirit of the net before all of that. A refuge, a haven for those who might not have been looking for it, but who need it the most. In order to understand what makes web phishing so appealing though, we need to look back. The early 2010s for me were a time of self-discovery. I just moved from the UK to Australia, I became a teenager, and there was one genre of game that me and my space heater, red HP laptop just couldn't get enough of: virtual worlds. I'd like to apologize in advance to my old English teachers before I say this next bit. To quote Wikipedia, a virtual world, also called a virtual space or spaces, is a computer-simulated environment which may be populated by many simultaneous users who can create a virtual avatar and independently explore the virtual world, participate in its activities, and communicate with others. Which is a lot of big words to basically say it's a type of big multiplayer game. For the younger folk, it's like Fortnite without the guns, most of the time. The one that took my heart, along with the hearts of many other kids, teens, and young adults at the time, was named Club Penguin. I remember being a kid, feeling lonely, moving countries will do that to you, and my friend from the UK told me about Club Penguin. It seemed perfect, a place where I could still hang out with him, but like online? Even though we're on opposite sides of the world? It became almost a second home to me. A digital third place, if you will. My penguin, named No Tail Blue because he had no tail and was blue, became an extension of myself. As well as hang out with my long-distance BFF, I did exactly as the tagline of the game suggested: waddle around and meet new friends. I even went so far as to have my very own Club Penguin girlfriend, or several. Yeah, that's right. Kid me was a player. I still keep in touch with that friend. While these days there's a lot of ways to connect, our friendship, especially after I left England, was nurtured over Club Penguin and games like it. But James, I hear you ask, what does this have to do with web phishing? Well, that's... I'm getting to it, alright? Club Penguin wasn't quite an MMORPG like World of Warcraft or RuneScape, or like Final Fantasy 11 or 14, where the main focus is things like questing, looting, grinding, etc. But it also wasn't quite a straight chat room either. The game was a place for kids and old people to just literally hang out. Within reason, of course. You can't be introducing kids to swear words in the snow forts. There were games. There were occasionally missions. EPF represent. There was even a membership you could sub to if you wanted to rock the latest threads, walk the coolest puffles, and have the maddest party at your Iggy. That's Igloo for those that are out of the lingo. All of these, however, were supplementary to the core aspect of hanging out. The extra activities were simply other ways for you to hang out with people, or to earn coins and other rewards that made hanging out with people more interesting. Club Penguin wasn't alone in the space of virtual worlds either. It was just the most prominent, at least for me. A few others that I personally played were Moshi Monsters, Bin Weevils, Pandanda, and I swear there was one where you were a car. It was literally like Club Penguin, but you were a car. If you know what I'm talking about, please tell me in the comments, because I'm starting to think I hallucinated it. If you're like me, the concept of a third place isn't really something that's crossed your minds before. You might have heard of it, but never really experienced it. In the ancient times, people would go to places like parks, coffee shops, libraries, shopping centers, or malls if you're American, to just hang out. It's a purely social, neutral zone that's separate from the other two places in one's life, home and work, at least according to Wikipedia. Sorry again, English teachers. Now, this isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. You may not need a third place, you may already have one, or maybe this framework doesn't apply to you at all. But for me, when I was younger, I only had two places: home and school, which according to the theory counts as work, or the place you spend most of your day. That's right. Not only was Kid Me a player, but also a hustler. Bro was out of the womb already maximizing shareholder value. So Club Penguin and other virtual worlds like it became my third place. It was a wonderland of new discoveries day after day. Over time though, as I became more and more accustomed to my new life in Australia, I got to that phase in early adolescence where everything you once enjoyed was suddenly, irreversibly cringe. My space heater, red laptop, became less of a Club Penguin machine and more of a serious gaming machine. That's right. I played Team Fortress 2, which, depending on how you look at it, is either a good thing or... Unrestricted internet access in your formative years really does things to you, huh? Either way. As I got older, my time in these virtual worlds became more and more sparse. Towards the later stage of my time in high school, I'd all but forgotten about Club Penguin, and the other ones had been in the dust for years. It was at this point, at this moment, that an announcement was made. No. Disney was pulling the plug on Club Penguin for good. And people realized that maybe they cared a little more than they thought. Some were sad, some were angry, others didn't care. And then there were people like myself who felt that a part of our childhood was being ripped away from us in favor of Club Penguin Island, this short-lived, mobile-optimized, microtransaction-riddled thing. Dude, it was like you couldn't take 2 steps without being pressured into spending money on a membership. I've done a bit of research, and from what I can gather, the devs didn't know that this was going to flat out replace the original. They were doing the best with the hand they were dealt, but this was met with middling to downright spiteful feedback. And then, with no fanfare, merely a year after the original went down, Club Penguin Island was thrown in a swimming pool and had the ladder removed. It went not with a bang, but a whimper. And there's been various attempts at rekindling that fire over the years with things like private servers and independent revivals, which is cool as f***, but it would never have the same kind of mainstream appeal that the official one did. And so that was the end of Club Penguin. And it wasn't alone. Virtual worlds didn't go out in a blaze of glory, they just faded from view, one by one, like the windows of a distant apartment block switching off into the night. And the saddest part was, we didn't know what we'd lost until it was too late. There's a shitload of videos about the time the world shut down, so I won't go too into that. Hell, you likely lived through it. And if you didn't, please click off this video. I've said it is not made for kids. I say naughty words sometimes like and you don't need me to tell you how wild of a time it was. But my point here is there's a timeline out there where these worlds didn't shut down, and they became havens for people like us. But instead, I and many others around me threw myself into Animal Crossing New Horizons, and for a while it worked. It almost captured that same magic. Almost. For a lot of us, that motivation didn't last. Hell, my own island in New Horizons is still kicking, but I haven't done anything with it since 2020. It's a time capsule of that period. Maybe I'll make a video about it one day. I don't know. But from there, things went into overdrive. Social media addiction became a real problem for a lot of Gen Z, and companies were feeding into it with engagement-based algorithms that were crazy optimized. Like, yeah, they'd been a thing for a while, but not like this. Online games, once a space for connection and companionship, became hyper-monetized, with almost everything having a battle pass of some kind, different ways to prove that you were more cracked than someone. And this was my 78th crown win, and in this one I got 20 elims and... what? And generally it just wasn't a nice place to be. There wasn't really something for you to look forward to coming home to after a long day at work or school or whatever it is you do with yourself. To just be. No grind, no subscription, no gotchas, just be. But then, in October of 2024, seemingly out of nowhere, a strange little game was dropped on the Steam store. I didn't discover web phishing until about a month after it released, but when I did, it latched onto me. I love the simplicity of the game. I love the low poly, low res presentation. I love the liminal ambient soundtrack. I love the humor in this game's writing. I love the minimal yet expressive character design. It's a breath of fresh air compared to the always online, almost omnipotent internet of today. There's no expectations, no microtransactions, no battle passes, no algorithms, nothing forcing you to stay engaged, just a $5 price tag and a server browser. My first time in game, I joined a random server and walked around and just talked in chat to the other people in the game. And talked. And talked. I couldn't quite figure out how the fishing system worked or how to get new baits, rods, etc. So I just typed away in chat to these strangers and it was comforting. Like I was returning to a place that I had forgotten. I played more and more, customizing my avatar, learning what the different types of bait did, figuring out how the guitar works, drawing Among Us in the public square, catching strange UFOs, that's unidentified fish objects. And I mainly found that the game's main objective was just simply hanging out. And I felt it again. I kept thinking about it over the next few days and found myself returning to the game late one night. I'd found myself in a server full of people waking up for the day. Time zones will do that to you. And we ended up talking about McDonald's breakfast options of all things and comparing what we have in Australia to what those guys had in the US. Side note, I learned what a McGriddle is that day and I'm like morbidly curious. For me, I think the beauty of web fishing lies in its impermanence. You join a server, talk to strangers, and then you leave. And that's it. But maybe one day, you see the same names again. And maybe you add them. And maybe you start talking more. And maybe, just maybe, you genuinely start looking forward to seeing them and you're back. Those virtual worlds you lived in when you were younger may be gone, but the spirit of them lives on. And hey, wouldn't you know it, you've just found it again. You're home.